Welcome to Civilspedia. As part of today's discussion, we will be discussing three topics under Prelim and credit growth under mains and NASA's Lucy mission, Zika virus and HIV and Montreal Protocol and Kigali agreement or amendment. First, we will discuss this Lucy mission. Before entering into the details of the mission, we will look into what is an asteroid, because the Lucy mission is the first mission to study about the asteroids in the orbit of Jupiter. All right, the two swarms of asteroids, one part of swarm that goes ahead of the Jupiter in its orbit, and another swarm of Trojan asteroids which are behind this Jupiter in its orbit around the sun. And asteroids are actually small pieces, small rocky pieces that orbit around the sun. Most of the asteroids are concentrated, most of the asteroids of our solar system are concentrated between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. In this, we can see that this is the asteroid belt, all right, where most of the asteroids of our solar system is concentrated, and it is between this orbit of Mars and this orbit of Jupiter. All right, and these asteroids are actually leftovers of formation of solar system, because 4.6 billion years ago, a big cloud of dust and gas collapsed, and most of the particles fell into the center and formed sun, and some gas and dust particles condensed to form planets, whereas some of the particles are left over in the solar system, and these leftover rocky objects which orbit around the sun are called as asteroids. And therefore asteroids are also called as fossils of planet formation, because if one studies asteroids, they will be able to understand about the history of formation of planets, history of solar system, and it will also help us to know about origin of life and also the molecular life on various planets and Earth in particular. And that is why Lucy mission has planned to study about the asteroids, particularly the Trojan asteroids, which are in the orbits of Jupiter. All right, and coming to what is a meteoroid, is that the broken piece of an asteroid in space is called as a meteoroid. And a meteor is nothing but whenever a broken piece of an asteroid, which is a meteoroid, comes close to the Earth's surface, Earth's atmosphere, not Earth's surface, comes close to the Earth's atmosphere, and when it enters Earth's atmosphere, it vaporizes. When it vaporizes, it appears, when it burns or vaporizes, it appears as a streak of light. And that streak of light we call as meteor, or it is also sometimes called as shooting stars because of the streak of light. But actually they are not stars, they are rocky objects. All right, that is meteor. And sometime when this meteoroid enter the Earth's atmosphere, they are not vaporized completely. All right, they are not vaporized completely, and they will be able to reach the Earth's surface as rocky objects, and those things we call as meteorite. And what is the difference between asteroids and comet? See, both asteroids and comet orbit around the sun, but the difference is that comets consist of only dust and ice, only ice and dust, whereas asteroids are rocky objects that orbit around the sun. Some of the earlier missions of NASA to study about asteroids are the Near Shoemaker spacecraft, which studied an asteroid near Earth by the name Eros, and it took the photograph of Eros and sent back to Earth in the year 2000. And another important and most significant of the earlier missions was the Dawn spacecraft, which studied two largest asteroids in the asteroid belt, which is between the orbit of Mars and the Jupiter. And the largest asteroid in that belt is Ceres. Second largest is Vesta. And it is this Dawn spacecraft which studied about both these asteroids. And very recently, on November 1, 2018, its operations were off because of running out of fuel. And it was launched in the year 2007 and concluded very recently on November 1. And the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft studied about this asteroid Bennu, which is also near Earth, and it was launched in the year 2016. Coming to our present mission, this is of discussion. This Lucy mission, it is to study 7 asteroids. 6 asteroids belong to these 2 swarm of Trojan asteroids. All right, and this is the planet Jupiter. This is the planet Jupiter, and a swarm of Trojan asteroids go ahead of this Jupiter, and a swarm of Trojan asteroids is behind this Jupiter. And it will study 6 of these Trojan asteroids, and 1 asteroid will be for part of the main asteroid belt. All right, and it is going to be the first mission to study the Trojan asteroids. And the name Lucy was given because Lucy was actually human fossil ancestor whose skeleton gave us an idea or information about evolution of humanity. And therefore, this mission was given the name of Lucy because the asteroids, particularly even the Trojan asteroids, are called as fossils of planet formation, which will give us enough information about the formation of solar system and planets and origin of life and molecular life on Earth and other planets. And it is about to be launched in the year 2021 in the month of October 2021. And the mission duration is expected to be 12 years. And the major components involved in this space probe on Trojan asteroids are that long-range reconnaissance imager, which will take HD images of these Trojan asteroids, and thermal emission spectrometer, which will analyze the heat given off by the surface features of these Trojan asteroids, and LRALPH scientific instrument and space explorer. It is one of the very important instrument that is to be used in this exploration, because the name Ralph was taken from this television series, the character in the television series, The Honeymooners. And this Ralph is an instrument actually used by NASA in New Horizons space probe experiment, and it has even traveled to Pluto and has extraordinary features to study such space objects. However, this Ralph scientific experiment is considered as a twin of that Ralph experiment used in New Horizons space experiment. And with this, we come to and this Ralph experiment, this space explorer is going to study the reflected sun's reflected light, which is nothing but the chemical fingerprint of the elemental composition or the molecular composition of these Trojan asteroids. That is how it is going to give us information about how origin of life or how origin of molecular life could have begun in planets or could have begun in Earth. And thus we will be able to understand various phenomena such as formation of the solar system, planets, etc. through this mission. Mission is going to be started or to be launched only on October 2021. With this, we come to the end of this discussion. Next, we will discuss about Zika and HIV. First, coming to Zika. Zika virus is a flavivirus. The name flavus in Latin means yellow because this virus causes yellow fever. The flavivirus term came into usage. And this flavivirus is different from HIV virus, which is a retrovirus. Retrovirus is different because retrovirus uses enzyme to convert its RNA into DNA, and that viral DNA of this retrovirus will be integrated with the DNA of the host cell. That is the most dangerous phenomena, and therefore the HIV virus replicates enormously and it affects the entire immune system of human body. But this flavivirus it does not integrate itself as a DNA to the host cell. It's DNA to the host cell. It remains as RNA and replicates. And the name Zika is because of this virus was first identified among monkeys in Zika forest of Uganda, and therefore the name Zika. And coming to symptoms, majority of the people who are infected with Zika virus do not show any symptom. The symptoms are very mild. In case of Zika virus, the symptoms are mild. And some of the symptoms are fever, headache, rash, and conjunctivitis, muscle and joint pain, malaise. And some of the very important complications this virus disease could lead to are congenital Zika syndrome, which includes microcephaly and other congenital malformations of child, and Guillain-Barré syndrome and neuropathy and mellitus. These are the very important complications, medical complications that could arise because of the infection of Zika virus and the disease. And when we discuss about the transmission, the primary transporter or the vector is of the mosquitoes of Aedes genus, which bite during the day, predominantly in the early morning and the late afternoon. And this is the primary transporter. And it is also the vector for yellow fever, chikungunya, and dengue. Earlier there was a prelims question based on this phenomena. And most of these Aedes mosquitoes are in tropical and subtropical regions. And pregnancy is also a reason. It is also a mode of route of transmission, and sexual contact, transfusion of blood and blood products, organ transplantation or tissue transplantation, and also contaminated needles or syringes, because it has the threat of transfusion of infected blood. All right. The transmission features are almost same, except this Aedes mosquito for HIV. Now coming to HIV, it is a retrovirus. We saw what is retrovirus. It integrates its DNA, its viral DNA to the host cell, host DNA of the host cell, prior to which it converts its RNA into DNA using an enzyme. And the symptoms of HIV vary depending on the stages of infection. Some of them are the fever. In the initial stage of infection, symptoms like fever, headache, rash, and sore throat will be seen. And in the advanced stage, swollen lymph nodes, weight loss, fever, diarrhea, and cough could be seen. Some of the very severe medical complications that could arise because of HIV virus is that tuberculosis, cryptococcal meningitis, severe bacterial infections, and cancers such as lymphoma and Kaposi sarcomas. These are cancers. Actually, it attacks the immune system. CD4 are the cells known for immune system in human body, and it attacks CD4 cells and replicates itself in human body, and therefore any infection can occur to a person affected with HIV virus. All right. And coming to transmission, exchange of body fluids, sexual fluids, but not saliva, and sexual contact, pregnancy, transplantations, and contaminated needles. When we talk about exchange of body fluids, penile fluids and vaginal fluids and rectum fluids from rectum could also are the most serious are talked about are discussed when we talk about body fluids. Sexual contact, pregnancy, transplantation, be it any organ transplantation or tissue transplantation, and of course contaminated needles, because they pose the threat of this transmission of blood. Breast milk is also there, and blood is also there by transmission. And it cannot spread through saliva and mosquitoes. And there is a question why mosquitoes could not transmit HIV, because HIV virus requires T cells to replicate itself in the organism. But mosquito do not have a T cell, therefore it cannot replicate, and therefore actually the HIV virus is digested along with blood food of the mosquito, and therefore it cannot spread HIV. With this we come to the end of this discussion, and next we will discuss about this Montreal Protocol and Kigali Amendment or Kigali Agreement in the year 2016. Prior to discuss about this Montreal Protocol, earlier there was a convention called as Vienna Convention for the Protection of Ozone Layer. It was adopted in the year 1985 and came into force in the year 1988. And after that, this Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer were agreed in 1987 and came into force in 1989. It aims to phase down certain man-made chemicals that had the potential to deplete the ozone layer. And an important fact to know, it does not only cover those chemicals which has only potential to deplete the ozone layer, but also that are potential enough to trigger global warming, to contribute negatively, heavily to global warming. And when we talk about Kigali Amendment, this Kigali Amendment was a result of discussion of 28th Conference of Parties of the Montreal Protocol, Conference of Parties of the Montreal Protocol, which was held in 2016 in Kigali, which is the capital city in Rwanda. And this amendment actually included hydrofluorocarbon also as a chemical to be phased down from 2019. It will come into force on 1st January 2019 for those countries which are going to ratify this amendment. And some of the chemicals that are to be phased down according to the Montreal Protocol are this chlorofluorocarbon, hydrochlorofluorocarbon, hydrobromochlorofluorocarbon, and hydrofluorocarbon. This was the recent chemical which was amended. This Kigali Amendment amended this Montreal Protocol to include hydrofluorocarbon and methyl bromide, methyl chloroform, and bromochloromethane, and finally carbon tetrachloride. These are all the chemicals that are to be phased down, that are involved in Montreal Protocol to be phased down to protect this ozone layer. Some of these man-made chemicals are also have potential to negatively affect global warming, trigger global warming. With this, we come to the end of this discussion, and finally we will discuss this credit growth. Recently, RBI in a notification has stated that bank credit, year-on-year increase of bank credit or the credit growth of banks has increased to the tune of around 14%, whereas the deposit growth has increased year-on-year increased only by around 9%. And in this scenario, we'll discuss what is credit growth. In relevance of banks, credit growth is nothing but increase of bank credit on year-on-year basis, that the amount given by banks to the institutions or companies or individuals, etc. And this increase in amount of loans given by banks is what is actually called as credit growth. And we should know what can happen during high credit growth, all right, high credit growth in terms of demand and in terms of supply. When it comes to demand or consumption, all right, when the money supply is more, when there is high credit growth, when the credit involved is more, it could lead to demand, and this demand could lead to inflation, and that is one thing. And when it comes to supply, the sectors which require a lot of credit, and because of this high credit growth, this sector will receive a lot of money, and which fuel increase in production, These are the two significant things that could happen during high growth, among others, all right. And coming to some of the factors that could affect this credit growth are this deposit growth. Only when deposits are high in a bank, only when there is a significant level of deposit in a bank, can a bank go for aggressive lending, or can a bank go for liberal lending policy. And there is also requirement of fluctuations. There should not be fluctuations and variability in these deposits as well. There should not be such seasonal variability of deposits. There should be some stability of these deposits as well, so that the bank could go for credit growth consistently, and to provide a stable economy, and to provide a stable support to infrastructural sectors or those sectors which require credit. And therefore, fluctuations and variability in deposits also affect this credit growth given by this credit growth or this bank credit given by the banks. And coming to the capital position, see, certain banks have a strong and larger capital position or the capital base, so as to give lot of loans, so as to give large loans, so as to not worry or to take risk in loans, not worry about taking risk in loans. So this capital position is also playing a very vital role, because when a bank has, when when a bank does not have a strong capital base, it cannot inject a lot of credit to the required agencies. When it comes to non-performing assets, a bank, say for example Dena Bank, a bank which is under the turmoil of non-performing assets, could not lend more. It will be already in tussle. Already it will be the terms of lending will be limited by the bank regulator, the RBI. And therefore, when a bank is giving credit, and if those loans are not paid actually in time, if the loans become non-performing assets, then the bank has to be extremely cautious about creditworthiness in the future, and it cannot that easily go for lending or injecting the credit, and therefore it affects credit growth. Non-performing asset management is very important. And also the lending rate of RBI. Lending rate of RBI is repo rate. The repo rate is the rate at which other banks borrow money from RBI. When other banks borrow money from RBI, and if that rate of interest is high, banks also will keep high interest rates so that its customers will borrow at high interest rate. And this will actually affect credit growth or credit flow among the individuals or companies, because when it's high interest rate, people won't take money from other banks. And also through the lending rate of RBI, it is also having a strong influence on the fact. It is also a factor that affects credit growth. Some of the important thing is that there has to be a required level of deposit growth for going for credit support or credit growth to finance infrastructural projects and various other projects in the society, and there has to be minimal fluctuations, or there should not be any fluctuations and variability in these deposits as well. And capital position of banks has to be strong and also larger, so as to do not worry about taking risk in lending, or to have a liberal lending policy. And also there should not be, the menace of non-performing assets should decrease, and there should not be such things, because it affects credit growth. Because when it becomes non-performing assets, banks' ability to provide or inject growth will become less, because it will become very serious about giving money. And in certain cases, creditworthiness cannot be ascertained, the bank will not provide or inject money. And coming to the lending rate of RBI, when the lending rate of RBI is less, banks also decrease their interest rates, and thereby credit will be, more people will apply for credit from the banks. And the lending rate, which is the repo rate, the rate at which banks borrow money from RBI, if it is increased, and it is also leads to increase in interest rate for the customers from banks which borrow money from RBI. With this, we come to the end of today's discussion, and we have discussed today the Lucy mission of NASA to be launched in October 2021, and Zika and HIV, one a flavivirus, other a retrovirus. And in HIV, actually the advanced stage is called as acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. And HIV is a virus, and AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, is a medical condition, right? And we saw about Montreal Protocol, and we saw that it is not only including the chemicals that only deplete the ozone layer, but also those chemicals which are potential enough to trigger or to cause or to negatively impact global warming. And finally, we saw about credit growth and the factors affecting it. With this, we come to the end of today's session. Kindly like, comment and subscribe to our Shankar IAS Academy YouTube channel for more updates.